Hey friends, Drive Metal here. I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting, where our goal is to help you start thousands of thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation. I've been really excited about this episode. My good friend Alan Ahlgrim is my guest, and we've known each other for years and years in the church world. Alan Ahlgrim is now leveraging the agony and the ecstasy of 50 years of ministry. Although he retired from being the senior pastor, founding pastor of Rocky Mountain Christian Church in Colorado, he now continues his work in SoulCare. He has a brand new book out called Soul Strength. We're going to be talking about that, but we're going to learn a ton from my friend Alan Ahlgrim. Let's jump right into this episode. So I'm here with my good friend, Alan Ahlgrim. Alan, welcome. Delighted to have you on the Church Planting Podcast.
It's an absolute delight. Great to be with you, Greg.
Alan, your book just was released not too long ago, Soul Strength, Rhythms for Thriving. And I've been watching, I've known you for a long time as a colleague, as someone I looked up to and still do, just a little bit ahead of me in the journey, along your ministry journey. And since you've transitioned from being a senior pastor of a thriving, growing church, multiplying church, watching you pour into leaders. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the podcast, was this idea of now as watching you pour into young leaders and some older leaders, and, through your book, pouring into me. Let's talk, your opening chapter is Embrace Your Story. So let's talk about that a little bit. Your story. What brought you to this point and writing the book and doing what you're doing now?
Well, it really wasn't my idea to write the book. I was agitated into doing it. I never intended to write the book. Many, many people have encouraged me to do that over the years. But I hear the voice of God through His Word primarily, and secondarily through the voices of others, especially the woman I currently live with, actually 54 years now. But in this case, it was a SoulCare group that said, you have got to write this down. And I said, well, you guys were supposed to be taking notes. I didn't realize it, but then later they said, no, you were agitated. I said, what? No, you were agitated. They disturbed me into doing this. And I'm grateful to have done this. Last year, it came out in January of 22.
Yeah, so the agitated to write the book, and I'm so glad they disturbed you to do that. But to be able to write that book, give us kind of your story a little bit that you reveal in the book, but senior pastor and then to where you are now.
Well, I received a strong sense of call when I was 15 years of age at church camp. I just knew it would never be preaching, but one thing led to another, and lo and behold, people actually would listen to me. I thought initially I would go into pastoral care and counseling and serve as a child in the military and so on, and then open a counseling center of some sort. Now, that never happened. I end up in growing churches, and that always surprised me. And because of that, I had growing influence with a large network, both those serving large churches and new church planting, which has been near and dear to my heart. Again, I'd never intended to do that. Just nobody would hire me. And I ended up starting a church. I'm from Chicago, and I ended up starting a church in Columbia, South Carolina. At that point, I thought the only Columbia I knew was in South America.
Yeah.
I was called to start a church there. It was 7 years there. Then I went to a larger church in Cincinnati. It was a turnaround situation for them. And then as things have unfolded, I developed friendships far and wide. One of the most soul enriching has been for me, Dr. John Walker. John and I know you know him well, Greg.
I do. Yes. He's counseled me many times.
Yeah. Well, I had the opportunity of having a soul enriching collegial partnership with him for, say 20 years. Almost every week we talked. And it was what he called intentional collegiality. Take a PhD psychologist to come up with that. And he poured into me, and he says I influenced him. And well, that's his story. But as that has unfolded, I ended up working with Dr. John Walker and his daughter, Dr. Charity Byers, for about 5 years, and partnered up with them and expanding their ministry. And then I worked with another group with Tim Hollingford in Cincinnati for a few years. And then I launched Covenant Connections. And that has produced amazing opportunities. I'm so grateful that I get to invest. I influence influencers. And I am now really focused on mentoring multipliers. So I'm helping leaders to connect head and heart in an uncommon way. And I'm always surprised. At first, I wondered if it was just some uniqueness I had, but now I have learned that following a model, a template that has evolved from me, that others are having amazing results as well. So I'm not the secret sauce. Some
let's
say,
dive into that a little bit. So Covenant Connections, and you in your book, you talked about, choose your circles, cultivate strong relationships. And that's
Yes.
really at the heart of Covenant Connections and, soul strength rhythms for thriving. So talk about that, what that looks like. And so we're talking to a lot of church planters, many of them younger, some of them not so young. What wisdom would you impart to them here?
Well, there's no better time to start than now. A lot of people have said, well, when I retire, I'd like to be able to do what you're doing. And my retort, I don't mean to be snarky about it, but if you're not doing it now, you won't do it then. I haven't changed anything, except I get to do more of the life enriching things now, because the demands of leading a large multi-campus ministry and traveling and so on. I couldn't have the freedom. I didn't have the freedom to do all that I'm doing now, but I always did some of this. And I believe that I don't any longer use terms like goals and habits, seems onerous to me, but rather rhythms. And we're familiar with the business statement that your systems are perfectly designed to get you what you're getting. I like to say your rhythms are perfectly designed to get you what you're getting. And your life is no richer than your rhythms, certainly reflective rhythms. That's reading and reflecting on God's word. And your relational rhythms, your life will be no richer than your relationships, and even recreational rhythms. So after this call, I'm going to get on my bike before my next set of appointments for the day. Yesterday, I went to the gym. I was swimming. We're hiking all the time. We live in Colorado. Sorry about that, Greg. I know. Yeah, you'd love to be out here. Right. Yeah. So I'm doing these things that I've been doing for decades. I'm 75, and I look at this now, and there's a pretty good shot I'll have another 25 years left. I've started the last quarter, but if not, I know what I'm doing now. This is a great day. I'm excited about this day. This is the day the Lord's made, and I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it. And I just want to help the younger leaders now who are so tired and so frustrated and frankly, feeling so alone, because depression is not, that's a common word. People admit to being depressed. What they won't admit to is being lonely. And that is really the root of our.
You've just done. We've got to unpack so much of the rich stuff you just said, and you used a phrase: you're only as rich as the rhythms of reflection, relationships, recreation. I want to dive into this because loneliness now. We've all experienced that. You know how important, because we've shared so much life together, how important relationships are to me personally. They've kept me in the game for the long haul.
Yes.
But let's talk about that. Rhythms of relationships. These men and women really need to hear that. So unpack that a little bit.
Well, first of all, I want to commend you, Greg, because you eat your own cooking. And that's what I keep saying to leaders. Are you eating your own cooking? Because we have leaders near and far who are happy to talk to others about their need for community, but they're relationally starving. They are technologically connected. They have all kinds of public influence, but they have no intimacy. And by that, I mean into me, you see. They have no sense that anyone really knows them at their core. And they're afraid of it, quite frankly, because they're afraid of being discovered to be lesser than someone else. When we get into a safe setting, we discover, oh, we're not the only flawed person. We're not the only one who struggles with hidden hurts and heartaches.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the phrases always used, even when I'm speaking in, large group gatherings, Alan, is we're all a mess. And if ministry's taught me one thing over all the years, it's that we're all a mess. And that's the whole point of needing God's grace and needing Jesus to come alongside of us and to put us back together. And the more transparent I am with others, Alan, the more transparent they are with me.
Absolutely.
And so sharing those flaws actually is, I always have kind of vulnerability hangover. When I am transparent and stuff, it's like after it, I'm going, and it's because it's scary, right? Until somebody walks up to you and says, man, thanks for that. Can I share something I'm struggling with you? Talk about, but Alan, like I don't, bleed all over the platform, right? So I'm transparent with a small group of leaders that I really trust deeply and that we've shared life with. Give some words of wisdom to our younger listeners. And honestly, I still think if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, I still think it's all, okay, how do I find these people and who should I trust?
Okay. Well, years ago, I was in a gathering of leaders of large churches down in Colorado Springs. I didn't know anyone in the room. Probably 15, 20, all guys sitting there. And the topic was authenticity. And I said, well, I think authenticity comes at 3 levels. And immediately they lit up. And you know how that goes when you say 3 to a bunch of pastors. They want to write that down. And so I describe it like this. If you just picture a pyramid, and we'll call it the pyramid of authenticity, the base of it is honesty. So as Christians, certainly Christian leaders, we should be in the bad habit of telling people the truth. I mean, we just don't lie. All right. That's honesty with all. We're not going to intentionally deceive. Now, we don't tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth to just anybody, but we don't deceive. And I do believe that we should live without self-protection or self-promotion. So this is honesty as a base. The next level up would be transparency. Early in my ministry, I got in trouble for using too many personal illustrations. Now, leaders get in trouble if they don't use personal illustrations. So transparency, I'll share some things. In fact, my recent speaking various congregations, I share some stories that wouldn't make any sense if I was asked by a greeter in a restaurant, how you doing? It was contextualized because of the scripture, because of a sense of commonality in a Christian community. So it's honesty with all, but then it's transparency with some, and then ultimately vulnerability with few. And there are levels of vulnerability. So in vulnerability, what I know is, just as you described, if I jump into the deep end of the pool, others will as well. And it only takes one person to do that in a safe setting, and others will buckle up and do the same. Well, mix of metaphors there. But if we can understand that this isn't forced, it's not required. I don't even use the term accountability. It sounds like the pastoral police. I just say we hold each other close. We could cycle back to topics that were lightly raised before. So often in a small group setting, it can be pretty tender at times, and yet sometimes later there's a follow-up that's just one-on-one. Again, it's not forced, and that's, I think, a freeing thing. where nobody feels like they're under obligation and there's not going to be a spotlight on them. Well, what are your 7 deepest, darkest sins? What's the worst argument you ever had with your wife in detail? No. That's not life-giving. That's life-draining.
Yeah. So I have 3 guys, as you know, that I have shared life with for about 20 years now, asking those questions. And
I know each of those guys well. Yes.
and they're not, so are we an accountability group? Yeah, well, we've never called ourselves that. We're just friends who love each other. And so I feel safe to say, hey, here's the struggle I'm going through, or can you pray about this or my wife and I are going through this, or this is what I'm going through with my son. And they do the same. And over the years, as we've gotten to know each other, and Alan, interestingly enough, when we started meeting together, we didn't know each other very well. It was just,
really?
I approached Tim Harlow and said, hey, I'm thinking, what do you think about starting this group? And I was thinking about asking Ben Kacharis. And then Ben said, why don't we invite Eddie Lowen? And then we got together for the first time and we spent a couple of days together, right? And so I think part of it is just you have to jump into it and commit to doing it and then make the commitment. Now we have to plan our schedules a year out to get together because everybody's so busy. Okay, I want to shift gears now because you talked about the rhythms of reflection.
Yes.
And that's the one I struggle with most personally. Just there's my true confession. Talk about what you mean by that.
Well, I'm an activist at heart, and I have always been in the fast lane and bothered that I didn't spend any time of consequence in a devotional life. And I made a vow, which I don't recommend anybody, but that I would change my ways early as a church planter, that I would spend it. I'm just embarrassed to say this, that I would spend 5 minutes a day reading God's word, not in sermon preparation, but just 5 minutes. Now, I did that just to get myself started. And years ago, I started what many do, reading a chapter of Proverbs every day that corresponds with the date on the calendar. Well, I've done that for years. To me, it's just a way to get started. But then what's interesting is that what began out of, frankly, a sense of duty. How can I have moral authority as a preacher if I'm not reading God's word myself and listening to him through the word? Now I crave it. I crave it. I had a short night. I was up early this morning, and I wasn't, frankly, if you will, preparing for this podcast. I was drinking deeply in God's word and reviewing things. I mean, I'm not only a slow learner, I am a quick forgetter, Greg. I have got to keep going back and reviewing these things again and again that have fed my soul. And so I crave this. I crave reflection. And I know that my life is never more, the more reflective I am, the more effective I am.
Okay, don't lose that. The more reflective I am, the more effective. Okay, but Alan, I've got to stop you there because I'm sure we've got, listeners and viewers right now, church planters, and I've been there myself for sure, where I'm going, well, I'm glad you crave that, Alan, but I sure don't. I've got 1,000 things to do. I'm busy. I'm stressed. Yeah. I don't crave it. How do I get to the craving point?
Oh, I think there's some simple things that, for example, I do a lot of quote journaling, which terrifies some people because they in fact, I talked to a doctor just Sunday. He said, I've actually had to go digital because I can't even read my own handwriting now. I can't. So what do you mean by journaling? Well, for me, I'm talking about bulletizing. So I learned something powerful for me just about 9 years ago, that gratitude is really the gateway to joy. And if anybody had discovered my occasional journal entries prior, they would have thought I needed to be institutionalized. So the discovery I made was that those who record gratitudes are not only the more grateful people, they are the ones who have the greatest emotional capacity to invest in others. So this is where I want to go right to the younger leaders to say, how can I continue to serve with some capacity of effectiveness and joy? It's so stinking hard. Well, if you can record, as I do, 5 reasons for gratitude every day, just bullets, boom, 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 boom. And that's, cuddling with your wife or spouse. It is having a great meal with a friend. It's walking your dog. It's having a soul enriching conversation. All of these things. If you'll do that, what I found to be so amazing is that I go through, as you know from the book, the 4 Ds of delight, drain, discovery, determination all the time. And I do it all the time. And I do it every week. And I have a remarkable week. Greg, I can't remember the last time and I've got documentation of this, when I didn't have a remarkable week. I can't believe I get to enjoy the things I get to enjoy, meet with the people I get to meet with, do the things I get to do. I am the most unbelievably blessed person that you're going to talk to today. Now, that's not to say that I don't have some challenges, of course, but they're overwhelmed by my gratitudes. And what I know is this: if I can go to bed with gratitudes in my head, I sleep better. Now, okay. You say,
no, I agree with you. One of the things, I go to sleep easily every night, Alan, and I sleep well. And as you know, we're in the ministry together, and there's a lot of weight that comes with that, and a lot of people that have trouble falling asleep and can't sleep well. But that's not. Yep. And I just want to build on what you just said, and it's so rich. The way I fall asleep at night, Alan, is I start off with, for me, it's just 3 things every day that I'm thankful for. I don't even go to 5, 3. And I list them in bed at night when I'm falling asleep. So last night, I remember I was thanking God for this hummingbird that flew to a flower right at my window that I got to watch for just a few seconds. And then I'm thanking God that my son Elijah, we just moved into the city of Cleveland. The first day of school yesterday, I said, oh, God, because I was begging for his life yesterday as he went to the first day of school, freshman in high school. Oh. He came home and he had a really good day. So I was thanking God. And I don't even know if I got to 3. I fell asleep. But the next morning then, I get my journal, Alan, and I write down those 3 things each day. Yeah. But that's how I fall asleep, and I sleep well. And tonight, I guarantee you, Alan, I'm going to be thanking God for this podcast with you, seriously, and going, God, I'm so grateful for that short time I got to spend with Alan, and that he's blessing so many leaders. So, I couldn't agree more on that reflection. And what a great first step, even if you're not a journaler, to start just doing that gratitude, 3, 5 things a day that you're starting your day with.
Yeah, it will. Well, all it will do is change your life for the better. That's all. And you don't have to say, but I don't have an hour to do that. I was sitting at lunch with someone who was lamenting their inability, lack of time to journal. I said, okay, well, why don't we just do something right now? I got a piece of paper, whatever he had there. I want you to write down, 2, 3, 4 things. He did. Great. I said, you just started. Yep. Now, I'm not talking about 5 hours. I'm not talking about 50 minutes. I'm talking about 5 minutes. Yep. If you get 5 minutes, you can do this. And I do believe that it's beneficial, just as you've discovered. One thing to think these things, it's something else to write these things, because it rewires our brain. I could tell you, my brain has been rewired. So I believe that, for example, for years, I would say, when people said, well, are you going to write a book? So well, if I did, it'd be maybe entitled Leading While Grieving, or Grieving While Leading. And every leader goes, whoa. Well, Greg, some of my story, and some of it I had to lead through. And now I realize that gratitude is the greatest antidote to grief.
Okay, just because I want to talk about this last one, the richness of your rhythms of recreation. And I noticed while you were, you said, well, yeah, so I'm going to the gym. I bicycled, and I'm going, well, Alan, that's just exercise. That doesn't sound like recreation to me. Until you got to hiking, and you know how much I love hiking. And so, yeah. So talk about that a little bit, what you mean by rhythm of recreation.
This varies. A lot of people have some health challenges. I want to stay in motion. And in fact, the reason in part that I could do all that I do, I'm never a great athlete like you or, back in the day, but I've always been active and I want to continue to be active. Therefore I'm active. So I do these things. I'm in a crazy thing at the Gold's Gym there, Mary. It's called Body Pump. And basically, it's a couple, 3 guys at the most in a class with a bunch of uber fit young gals. And I call it my humility class. Well, it's lighter weight, but it's constant repetition. And you do this until your arms are going to fall off. Okay. But I've had some shoulder issues because, as you know, I played linebacker in the NFL for many years, Pro Bowl experience. Oh, yeah, right.
Exactly.
So, yeah, right. And plus, my experience with Cirque du Soleil, I am unbelievable. Well, I've got some issues. Okay. And so I'm finding that motion is lotion. So I've got recreation for me is not tiddlywinks. It's not checkers. It's movement. It's good for my soul. For years, when I could run before I messed up my knee, I found that was some of my best prayer time as I was running. Now I don't run, but I do all kinds of other things, hiking, of course, snowshoeing, bicycling, and it's been good for me. In fact, I would say this, I'm in better shape now at 75 than I was at 65. And it's because I've got more time to do the things, but I always did some recreation. I don't know how I would have gotten through the stress of the stuff I carried if I had not been doing things recreationally.
So, Alan, one of the things, to a really practical level, that I try to practice in the same way. So for me, going to the gym, I've had stretches where I've done that. I've had a personal trainer. I've done all those things, right? I'm not wild about it. It's hard for me to sustain that. But the one thing I can do regularly is just simply to walk. And here's what I would say. If I can walk 3 to 5 times a week, and preferably 5 at least, it keeps me really recreated. And if you're married, the other thing I found, I walk with my goal is to walk with Julie at least 3 times a week. And that would be for 2 to 3 to 4 miles at a pop. Okay.
Yes.
And the benefits of that are, number one, if I'm walking by myself, I do spend, like you do, a lot of time in prayer and kind of listening to God. If I'm walking with Julie, we have these great conversations and we'll pray together about some of those things that we're talking about. And so it's relationally really healthy. And then it's just movement, like you said. And that's something that walking is something that virtually everyone can do.
Well, a neurosurgeon buddy of mine has been in a group, a SoulCare group at church with me, because I've had some issues of various sorts of balance and knee issues and neck issues and stuff. He says, but walking is the best thing for you to do. Well, for us, walking is a given. We have a dog. In fact, they say if your dog is overweight, you're not getting enough exercise. So we walk Molly Brown, the dog of renown, this Labradoodle, and she requires activity, like an hour a day. But interestingly, we don't even now consider an hour a day of walking Molly to be exercise because it's like, well, I don't know, we just do that. But we do classes of various kinds and the other activities. But in part, we don't live in the South. And I just was down in Savannah, but I've got family down there, and my close friend, as you know, down there. And we don't have to live with the humidity that some do, or the challenges of living in a city as you are. We have but there are places you can go anywhere. You can find place to move, and it's essential that you look for that. You take initiative. You have the responsibility. There's nobody that's going to lead you but you. The hardest person for me to lead is to lead me. All right, I have to lead me. So quit complaining about what you don't have. Look for the opportunities that you do have. You can do something, and something is better than nothing.
So the rhythms of recreation, the rhythms of relationship, and the rhythms of reflection. Alan, thank you so much. The book is Soul Strength, Rhythms for Thriving. You can pick that up on Amazon or wherever great books are sold, and encourage you to get that. Alan, thank you so much for your time and your insights and wisdom. I'm grateful.
Blessings on you, Greg.